Hi guys, welcome back to the old mill shed. So I've gotten a few requests, messages from former trainees and people who also train new machinists or machine operators where I currently work. And they all kind of had the same question. Why don't I make a series or a video on what I teach my trainees the first week or two that I have them? So these videos are not going to replace what a trainer or an experienced machinist is going to teach you, nor will it replace what you would learn at a school. If you're looking at becoming a professional machinist, I highly recommend finding a local technical school, community college. If you're still in high school and this is offered through your VOTEC program, I would highly recommend you take advantage of those resources. Alright, so first things first, you got to learn how to talk and how to read numbers like a machinist. This is the first thing I teach you when you show up for me to start training you. So, the whole time you were in school, let's make that decimal point a little bigger so it shows up. The whole time you was in school and you started counting and you started doing everything, this was the basis of all of your counting. And when I say that, one was like the root unit. One pencil, one marker. In machining, the thousandths place is that for us. Let me try it another way. When you're coming through school, the thousandths place is a fraction of that. In machining, that the 1 or the 2, the 3 is a collection of this number. And then these will be a portion of this number. The thousandths place is the 1,000th of an inch is the basis of how we measure everything. Now I'm hoping that's clear, and it'll become more clear to you here as we go along. So when you read a number like this, very seldom are we dealing over here to the left of the decimal point, but that is still going to be an inch. Okay? Now those of us who are micro machinists like myself, and the biggest part that we run may be 360 thousandths. So we're nowhere near even utilizing a number over here. These three numbers here, the 2, the 3, the 4, you take that number and you read it as thousandths. So whatever that is, if that's a 004, you read that as 4 thousandths. If it's a 014, you read that as 14 thousandths. Or as it is here, 234 thousandths. The fourth decimal place, the fourth place behind the decimal, it's 1/10,000ths, but if we said that out all day long, we would never get anything done when we're communicating to each other. So we read that as tenths. Now I know when you were coming through school, that was tenths. That's because that was 1/10 of your base unit. In machining, this is 1/10. This place is 1/10 of your base unit. So we would read this as 234 134 thousandths and 5 tenths. And then we get down here, this is the 10 millionths place. And honestly, most of our measuring devices will only measure this as a 0 or a 5. Some of our laser micrometers, some of our vision systems will go down to the millionths place. But for all practicality, this is as far as we're going here. So you just read that number and times it by 10 to get what you would say. So that's a 6. So 6 times 10 is 60. So we would read that as 60 millionths. So this number here is 1 inch, 234 thousandths, 5 tenths, and 60 millionths. Okay, so we have some numbers here, so we can go through them. So this one would read 163 thousandths, 4 tenths, and 30 millionths. This one is 270 thousandths, 40 millionths. We don't mention the tenths because there's nothing in the tenths position. 1 thou, 3 tenths, 40 millionths. And then we come down here and you see something a little different. So this reads 2 thou, 7 tenths. Now we have a tolerance here. Plus 0 minus a tenth. So if you was making a part and say your ID, well, it'd be kind of hard to make an ID at 2 thou 7 tenths. Say you had a flange width 2 thou 7 tenths wide, which is common for what I do. That means if I make that part between 2 thou and 7 tenths and no less than 2 thou 6 tenths, that's a good part or a good feature. Here we have 147 thousandths plus or minus 2 thou, which means that this feature on the part can be between 145 thousandths and 149 thousandths. So I hope that kind of helps clear up a little bit on what we are talking about when we say certain things. So the next part is, okay, well, I see the numbers, I know what you want. How do we figure out how to get to that number? Well, before we go through trying to figure out how to get to that number, we need to know, how do we know what we're measuring is correct? And in other words, how do we know what our gauge is telling us is what the measurement actually is? So this is where your Joe blocks and your pins come in. Now, Joe blocks are a set of blocks that have been tested by a company. I usually use MHC. These are actually getting pretty close to needing calibrated again. But what these are, you'll get a certificate and it'll tell you every size that you have in here and the deviation from nominal. And it does it in millions. And when you're dealing with these, you never really want to touch these with your bare hand. Always keep a piece of VCI paper in here to keep these from rusting. And always keep your little piece of chamois cloth, I think is what you call it, a little piece of leather. You want to wipe everything off when you use it. And I will usually put on a set of gloves when I'm using these. So let's say I want to make sure my Vernier calipers are reading like they should. I'm going to take my 1-inch block. I'm going to wipe it off. And it is reading 1 inch. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not. I know Vernier calipers are kind of hard to read. Now, say that I have a part that I'm making that is 1 inch, 1/10, and 80 millionths in size. And I want to make sure that I'm hitting, that my gauge is reading right. Or say I need to set up a dial indicator that I want to read 0 when this part is at that size. I have my 1-inch block. I'll pull out my 100 thousandths and 8/10ths block, and again I'll wipe it off. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then you take these two together and you slide them in like that, and they stick somewhat. What you're doing, you're removing the air in between them, and now this block should be 1 inch, 100 thousandths, and 8/10ths. And it is. Then when you're done, you slide them back apart. Again, you clean them up good. And you put it back where it belongs in your box. Put your piece of VCI paper on it. Put your certificate back in. Put your piece of leather in here, and then you put it back into a controlled environment. You don't want to leave these things like out in your shed or whatever. I keep these in the house where the humidity is low and where the temperature is constant pretty much all the time. Now say you have diameters that you need to check. Inside diameters you need to check. You have a set of pins. Now this is a second-hand set of pins that was given to me. As you can tell, they really weren't taken care of that well. They got a little bit of rust on them. But it works in the same ways. And these are for reference only, so they do not have a certificate with them. But this set goes from, if I had all the pins, 51 thousandths all the way up to 250 thousandths. So if you're having ID that you're having to drill, ream, and it needs to be fairly precise, you would get your pins here and say it could go as low as, say you was doing a hole and it could go like 130 plus or minus 2,000. What you would do is you would get your 130 pin for your nominal, and then you would get your 132 pin for your no-go, and then you could get 128 pin for your go. So as long as this went and this one did not go, your hole is in spec, at least as far as the diameter. Okay, so now that we have our basics down on how to, one, communicate what we're trying to measure, and two, how do we know that our gauges are reading correctly, now we'll start going over some of the different measuring tools that we use. Now the first one seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's actually the steel scale. Alright, so on the steel rule, or steel scale, we have several different scales on it. So on this side here, it will have a number on it, number 8. That means on this scale up here, each one of these divisions is an 1/8 inch. Down here you will see the number 16, which means each one of these divisions is a 1/16 of an inch. On the ends of this side, each one of those divisions is a 32nd. And then you can flip it over, and you also have a 32nd inch scale here. And if you go to the top, it is 64. So each one of those divisions is a 64th of an inch. Some scales, such as this one, has a 10ths scale. So each one of these divisions is a 10th of an inch, or 100,000ths. And then the lower scale, each one is 1/50th of an inch. The next measurement tool we're going to cover is the caliper. Now calipers mainly come in 3 different styles. You have the Vernier or the Vernier. You have the dial calipers, which I have a 6-inch Brown and Sharp and a 12-inch Mitutoyo. And then the other style is a digital caliper, to which I don't own. I don't use a whole lot of digital measuring tools outside of maybe depth gauges and digital bore gauges. What makes the caliper so useful is you actually have 3 measuring tools in one unit. You have the OD, you can check the OD of a part, which is, this one is 310 thousandths. I could check the ID of a part, which I have 246 thousandths. I can also check the depth of a part, which in this case is 746 thousandths 5/10. And that's what makes these just so incredibly useful, especially in the home machine shop. You will notice though, at the bottom of this, it has a little cutout here. And that's for a very good reason. When you're using the depth gauge portion of the mic, the orientation of the cutout is very important. Say that you are you're measuring the depth of a drilled hole. Now you know with drill bit you have a set diameter, but you have this angle piece at the bottom where your flutes and your cutting edges, not your flutes, but your cutting edges and the tip go. So if you're measuring your depth here, you don't want to measure all the way down to the tip typically. You want to measure your usable depth at the diameter of the drill. So what you do is you put your depth gauge in this configuration. You want the long side next to the wall, so when you measure it, you can catch that little angle right there and get a more accurate measurement of your depth. On the other side, say you're plunging with an end mill. No matter how sharp your end mill is, you're always going to get these little radiuses down here in the bottom. So if you measure it like that, you might catch this radius right here and give you an inaccurate measurement. So you put your depth gauge on your caliper like this, so when it's down in here, that edge is up next to the wall, and it clears that little radius right there, and you have an actual accurate measurement from the top of your part down to the bottom of the hole. Okay, so how do we check zero? It's actually very simple. We'll grab my Vernier calipers here, and we'll go over how to read these here in a moment. Keep you a pack of note cards in your job box, on your workstation, whatever. Just make sure they're clean. And all you do is you take your jaws here, close them on your note card, and pull the note card out, and look for any dirt. And you see there was just a little bit of dirt on there, so we're going to go right next to it, and we're going to do it again. And it was clean this time. And then I'll look on it, and it is 0. A dial caliper is the same way. And I'm going to turn it around here so you can see how it works. But you find a clean spot here, just push it up. And it is reading about 1/1000th off. I don't know if it'll focus or not. Well, at that angle it looks like it's actually dead on. But to adjust it to sit 0, you have a little sit screw right here. There it is at the bottom. It's kind of hard to do this at 180 degrees. You just loosen that, move the dial until, with the jaws completely closed, the little needle's on 0, and just snug that back without moving it. And you're zeroed. Okay, so the first caliper that we're going to learn how to read is the Vernier or Vernier scale caliper. The gradients are really small on the actual measuring tool, and it's really hard to get them to show up on camera. So I have replicated it on the whiteboard, and we'll go through it over there. So here's a replica of your Vernier scale. The big numbers here are your inches, and you'll notice each inch is divided up into 10 segments. Each segment represents 100,000ths, and then within each 100,000th segment you have 3 tick marks, and each one of those represents 25,000ths. This is what it looks like on the actual measurement tool. See if that'll come in here. There you go. You can kind of see it there. So you got your 0, your 1, your 10 gradients, and then you have 0 through 25 down here. And this slides. I get this to unlock and move. You see that scale right there slides with the jaw. And how do you read that is only one of these divisions will line up with a mark up here at any one time. And on this one right here, you can see between the 20 and the 25 divisions, 23, or that's 22, is the one that lines up. So to read this, the 0 on the scale has made it past the 300,000ths mark, and the first division after the 300,000ths mark, which is another 25,000ths, but it has not made it to the second division. So we know that we are at least 325,000ths. Let me grab a marker here and we'll write that up on the board. Alright, so we know that we are at least 325,000. See if that shows up there. There we go. Now on the sliding scale, like we said before, it lines up on the 22,000ths mark. So you add those together. We have 347 thousandths. And you can always go back and double check it. Does that number make sense? Well, yes, because the 0 is almost to the 350 thousandths mark, but not quite. And it's over the 325 thousandths mark. That is really close to the 350 thousandths, but just slightly under. So that measurement does make sense. The dial caliper is a little simpler to read. Basically, you have your scale here. See if that'll focus. You have 0 through 1, and then you have your 10 gradients, the same as you do on your vernier, to give you your 100 thousandths. The 100 and the thousandths positions are on your dial here. So this dial has the 0 plus 99 divisions. Each division equals a thousandths. So if I was to move this scale, say, to right here, you see that little piece of metal right there? You read it off the end. Oops, sorry. You read it off the end of that little piece of metal right there. Mitutoyo, their piece of metal is a little longer, but it operates in the same way as the Brown and Sharp. So I'm looking at this caliper, and the little metal piece is just past the 900 thousandths mark. And if I look at the dial, I am reading, I'm in between the 12 and the 13 thousandths. So that would read 912 thousandths and 5 tenths. Now this isn't actually supposed to read in tenths, but if you're in between the 2 thousandths and you're like right in between the division almost equally, you can assume that you're pretty close to 5 tenths. Okay guys, so that's the video. It's just a basic introduction. There'll be at least 2 more videos following this up, and then after that it's going to basically be on request of people running into certain issues or wanting to learn something, or maybe even a project. Something you want to see, just shoot me an email. I'll leave my link in the description. That's the video. We just got a little bit to get our feet wet. The next video we will go over the micrometers, depth gauges, probably thread gauges. I think I can squeeze that into the next one. And then after that we'll actually do some sit-ups on the lathe and check total indicated run out, how to set up a dial indicator to bring your carriage back to a preset position. And as always, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It helps the algorithm a lot. We'll see you here next time under the shed.